Hi, my name is Wren Handman, and I'm a screenwriter. I have been writing since I was about 4 years old. I was in a very artistic, creative family, and it was just a really natural outlet. I wrangled all of my little tiny kindergarten friends, and we did a play, and then we recorded it. You hear my mom talking on camera because she didn't know the microphone would be able to pick her up. It's so cute. High school, I decided I didn't want to go to university because I knew I wanted to be a writer, and my dad said, "Tough luck, you're going to university." So I looked around, and at the time, UVic was the only school in Canada that had a writing program where you actually graduated with a degree in writing as opposed to a degree in English with a specialization in writing. I am obsessed with speculative fiction. I love that question of what if the world was like ours, but just a little bit different. So for me, that plays out in a lot of different ways. I love like modern grounded sci-fi. I love paranormal fantasy where it's our world, but there are sort of magical elements, a good thriller even where you're taking reality and you're just like tweaking it a little bit and making it a little bit more extreme. That's my bread and butter. I started really invested in the fiction world, and I was writing novels and I was writing short stories and, doing whatever I could in the arts industry to pay the bills, because we all know that doesn't. And then my good friend Amy Fox decided to work on this show called The Switch, and it was a trans sitcom, so celebrating trans life instead of all of these sort of depressing narratives that existed at the time. And she didn't know a lot of writers. She had a ton of trans friends, and she wanted to bring in writers to sort of help these trans people tell their stories. So she contacted me, and I had a little bit of experience in film from school, but I hadn't done it practically in the real world yet. So it was just this absolutely incredible off the deep end experience where we all got together in this huge room and we just talked about story and we talked about narratives and what people wanted to see. And then eventually after that collaboration, three of us, including Amy, sat down and wrote a TV show. And that was really the beginning of my journey into film and television. And Amy and I had such a good time, and we collaborated so well. When it was over, we didn't want it to stop. So we decided to become writing partners, and we've been working together for almost a decade now. Definitely collaboration changes the name of the game. And I think for me, script writing by its nature is very collaborative. Whereas I do fiction writing as well, and that's a very sort of private, quiet thing where you have an entire book written before you show it to anyone. Whereas screenwriting, that collaboration comes so naturally that I do all of my screenwriting now in collaboration with Amy. So we, one of us will have an idea that we're really excited about, we'll bring it to the other person, and we'll just start workshopping it together and make it really belong to both of us. So we try to make sure that even if one person kind of births the story, that we're both involved in, midwifing it into being. We are really big on treatments. We have had a lot of experiences where we get excited and we run to a first draft, and then we realize there are huge structural changes, and it is so messy to try and clean up a first draft. So now we are really adamant that not only do we need a treatment, we need a treatment that's been workshopped, that has outside eyes. Often, if we're working with a producer, we love to have them come in at the treatment stage because we know they're going to have some great ideas, and we really want to get that in there. So we're very collaborative. So it really comes down to, a beat sheet first, but then we just dig into that 2, 3, 4-page treatment, and we get that really, really strong and really solid where we're really happy with it before we start looking at scenes and dialogue and all that stuff that comes in the next stage. And for that, once we have a treatment that's been so collaborative, we usually sort of chunk the project up into pieces that we're excited about. We each take it away, we work on those pieces, and then we come back, we swap pieces, we work on each other's, put it back together again, and now we have a whole thing. We go through that scene by scene and make sure it's all flowing and that our notes are working with each other, our voices are working with each other, characters are consistent, all that stuff until we have a solid, strong first draft. I think as a collaboration, the hardest part of writing is finding consensus. That sometimes you'll run into something where you feel really strongly that it should be A, and the other person feels really strongly that it should be B. And we have a philosophy in our writing team that when that happens, it's never, ever about trying to convince the other person that you're right. It's always about finding C. So what is that thing that neither of you have thought of? that brings in those elements of A and B that you both really liked, and how can you find a new path that's going to make both of you happy. And that's something that we see in collaborations a lot, where we kind of have to teach people that philosophy and explain to them that this is the way we work and this is how we make it work, is that it never becomes an argument. You never dig your heels in. You always let that creativity and that collaboration grow. It's been really interesting because Amy is very direct and she loves feedback that just tears things apart. I'm a little bit more emotionally invested in some of our stories. So I'm a huge fan of the sandwich method. I want to hear a little bit of what's working, just like a little bit of nice stuff, then you can tear it apart. My big thing is always take the feedback in and sit with it before you make changes. Oh, that's a great question. I am a huge nerd, so I am obsessed with a lot of different franchises and different properties. One that I have always desperately wanted to see adapted is the Kushiel series, Kushiel's Dart. It's a sort of epic, sprawling fantasy series. It's very sexy, lots of political intrigue. And so I would be so curious to see what we could do with that if it went onto the screen. And the other one is just anything Neil Gaiman does. He's just incredible. I've been watching Good Omens this week, so it's on my mind. If he called, oh my God, I would die. I think one of my personal big dreams is to see one of my novels adapted in some form. I think the idea of being able to see one of those stories play out on the big screen would just be so satisfying. And Amy is so supportive of that. We're actually working on a pilot right now of an adaptation of my sci-fi novel, Wire Wings. It is about virtual reality and artificial intelligence. It's about a teenage girl whose best friend has just died, and she's really struggling to be engaged with the real world. And there's this virtual world that is so much more attractive, where she can be herself and be free. And so it's all about those sort of relationships. There's a trans narrative throughout it, so it's very queer, which we both love. We're hoping that'll be the next big project we sort of get out there and start pitching. So I'm really excited about it. I saw this question on the list and I was like, oh God, no. I feel like this is my dread question, because I am an enthusiastic human. I love everything, and I love different things. You know, I've got my popcorn stuff, and I've got my bad mood pick-me-up stuff. One that came to mind, I think my favorite show in the last sort of decade or so, was The Magicians. I thought it was just a phenomenal blend of, you know, that magic stuff with really realistic characters. It was progressive and queer, and it was weird, and I loved how weird it got and how they did all this really experimental stuff, but the show was still very much in reach. It wasn't, you know, like art film. It was still very much a, you know, pop culture experience. I thought that was really phenomenal.